Whoops. Okay. And once again, we are back. I forgot to record the first game, so I'm going to have to try and record it from my VODs for the people who are watching YouTube. So I do apologise about that. I thought I set it up so it would automatically record every time I started streaming, but it seems I messed that up. So I do apologise. But we're going to move straight into the second game. This is the second game, the second best of three, or the first game of the second best of three today. The other two games will be casted tomorrow, of course. This is FanTaSy versus HiyA. FanTaSy, as you can see, is on the left here, and HiyA is on the right. I may not speak Korean, but after watching FanTaSy for so many years, I know the characters for his name. Purely from watching Pro League VODs so much, but yeah, of course, the map you will be seeing today is Aztec. Quite a good map for TVT. There wasn't actually any TVTs recorded via Casper on Aztec, funnily enough. It was one map that didn't really see much TVT, probably due to how powerful Protoss was on this map, so of course there was all of the TVPs. But that's quite an interesting statistic to note. The fact that in the real Pro League and OSL, there wasn't actually any TVTs here, so we'll have to see what TVT plays out like, and the two players that will be doing that for you today is SK Telecom T1's FanTaSy, who you can see here, did go 2-0 in his group, did have a win against Terran. He did beat his teammate SK Telecom T1 I Love Uv in a shocking upset if we were to take the real players into account. And so of course this is his round of 8 game. He was seeded into the round of 8, so he won't of course meet any of the other winners until the round of 4, if that was to happen. And that's where his opponent here, who is Oz's HiyA, or Hosing Oz's HiyA, and he of course did come up from the losers match, or from the losers match and the final match. Lost his first game to Boxer, which for some reason isn't showing here, so I need to fix that. He of course then went on to beat, I'm fairly certain he went on to beat his teammate Dongray. Oh, of course. Okay, so it's only his first game that isn't being recorded, so I'll have to change that. But he did beat Oz's Dongray in the final match of his group, as Dongray did go through Grape along with Boxer to get to the final match. So of course, once again, another player suffering a team kill in this OSL. There was a lot of Oz, SK Telecom, and it's mainly Oz and SK Telecom who signed up to this tournament actually. So the next time I host an individual tournament, hopefully we'll see a lot more of the teams participating with their players. Of course, Khan just joining Shinhan Tank Pro League recently. Their first game of the entire tournament is actually going to be cast, I believe, next weekend. So watch out for that. I'm not sure what players are on Khan, of course. I only know the aliases. I do know all the other players, but the captain of Khan is being really secretive about who his players are, so I don't, even as the organizer, I have no idea who his players are, so it'll be really interesting to see how well they face. But of course, talking about Oz here, Oz and HiyA. HiyA in real life, of course, one of the strongest Terrans right now on the post-Casper scene. Just recently doing incredibly well in tournaments, streams pretty much every day. I don't know where he finds the time, but his skill certainly hasn't waned, and from what I can remember from the first couple of games I've seen him play in, this HiyA has been quite aggressive, much like the real HiyA, so it'll be interesting to see how he fares in this TVT against FanTaSy, who FanTaSy, of course, known as the terrorist in real life, and the player playing as him doesn't seem very scared of doing his own form of harassment. So it'll be interesting to see what builds both of these players will come out for this map. Of course, Casper, there's no Casper bots to study for this, of course, so this will all come down to player experience on the map. Aztec being one of the most played maps on ladder from what I understand when it's map of the week. So let's throw up the intro and let's get going. And there are both players, both looking ready as they always do. They're very, very good at playing musical statues. The minute the music stops for the intro, they both know to stay perfectly still, and they stay in the same pose every week. So that's quite impressive. But let's jump into the game and let's get going. First game of the second best of 3 you will see today. FanTaSy versus HiyA. Once again, I do apologise for being a little bit disorganised today. I've spent the past weekend playing a lot of Splatoon, and that's not a very good excuse. But studying Splatoon has eaten up my time. So, well, studying and Splatoon, should I say? But yeah, of course, back to the game. On the 5 o'clock position, I'll call this. We do have Oz's HiyA in the teal, and of course over here in the 8 o'clock position, purple Terran, we do have SK Telecom T1's FanTaSy. And I'll hit the right button soon. There we go. Of course, TBT, it's my favourite matchup to watch in Brood War, but I know a lot of people, even when I was watching it live back when it first, like when it was airing for Pro League and whatever, a lot of people aren't a very big fan of TBT. Some of the games can be incredibly long. The longest I think I remember watching was about 1 hour 10 minutes. But I've played myself longer games than that on ladder, where both of us have refused to leave, and one game I played went down to 1 Wraith against my buildings and a tank, which I was covering up, and like a turret or something as well. So TBT can be pretty ridiculous at sometimes. FanTaSy looks like he's going to build his barracks a little bit further forward here, setting out his SCV a little bit earlier as well to get that building. He'll want to try and defend the top of his ramp the best he can. Of course, the mains on this map are below the naturals, which is very, very good for aggressive players. That's why Protoss has a very good time on this map. FanTaSy opting to actually scout around. Something to note, FanTaSy must have studied Oz's, or HiyA's VODs from the previous games in the SCPL and OSL, because I do believe against Dongray he actually won his best of 1 against his teammate with a proxy BBS. So of course not afraid of being relatively aggressive is our HiyA here, and he is going to scout on a relatively normal time, actually opting to build his gas now, or if you look in FanTaSy's base there's no gas going up, so FanTaSy is going to go for a 1-Rax FE, which is going up now. The scout goes out from FanTaSy a little bit later, but he will see where this SCV has come from, so it'll be relatively interesting. FanTaSy actually opting to send out 2 scouts, so being very, very careful of some sort of cheesy play from HiyA here. Luckily enough, his Marine does pop out at the perfect time to defend his SCV that's building the command center. And FanTaSy's still scouting around the middle of the map just to make sure there's definitely no proxies. And he will find out now by the, like, he's finally got to HiyA's base, and he will find that in his base he's actually building two factories. So there's a 2-factory play now coming out of HiyA, only opting to build 1 Marine, and he's going to fly off his barracks to scout on a relatively normal time, so FanTaSy may just about see this with the CV if the Marine doesn't drive it away. But he will see there's only 1 Marine and 1, oh, of course, the barracks. So it'll be interesting if FanTaSy actually reacts to this. It looks like he's going to build in. There we go, there's his factory now. So his factory's going up. He does have his marines and a bunker ready. The SCV actually trapped behind the marine there. Idle a little bit long, but there it goes. It's going to go down on mine. And FanTaSy now adding on his gas, his factory going up, is going to have a little bit of a hard time dealing with this 2 factory pressure. Looks like he's actually going shop first, 2 shops actually. So this is quite interesting, and it's a very interesting play in TVT because you can either opt to go for 2 fact vultures really early on and get really early map control with mines and speed super early, or you can opt. There is another version of 2 fact build for TVT where you can go for mines on vultures and siege tanks, which can make it incredibly difficult. You can set up a really powerful contain, if not actually kill the opponent if they're not ready. Siege is coming up now. It looks like FanTaSy's machine shop has only just started now, so his tanks are going to be a lot later. If he opts for tanks, he could even go straight into vultures, which could be incredibly deadly against this sort of build. FanTaSy's going to scout again, still unsure about what exactly HiyA's doing. He's going to find there's no command center here, which can tip him off for some form of aggressive play. But of course he's not going to be able to scout exactly what it is. Oh, the SCV does get on the ramp. He may have just about seen those factories. Let's just check his vision quickly. And no, he didn't. Oh wait, hold on, no, in this game that doesn't work that way. But I don't believe he would have from there, but it's possible. So he may have seen the 2 factories, now adding a 2nd factory on himself, adding on a tank. It looks like he hasn't opted to research anything, and chooses to cancel the comsat for some reason there, unless it wasn't a comsat. No, it looks like he was actually building a supply depot perhaps to wall off against the vulture run-bys, but that's quite interesting. Whatever building he built there he cancelled, obviously blocking off his comsat later on, so he didn't want to deal with that. The push of near death, I would say, is slowly moving across the map for HiyA. FanTaSy's going to move out now and try and stop it by the looks of it on this ramp. He doesn't know exactly what's coming for him. I guess he must have seen the 2 factories, but he could be thinking there is some kind of vulture play coming still. And here is where he sees the tanks for the first time, and he needs to move his tank back really quickly. He gets it back just in time so it doesn't die, but this vulture is going to chase him. And it looks like HiyA has actually got in a very decent position here. He's going to move up himself, a nice contain, perhaps even push in. There's only 1 tank to defend against this. FanTaSy now adding on 2 shop factories for tanks himself. He's going to try and hold this with what he's got, but 1 tank against 3, that's simple maths. Oh, there's 2 tanks now. The bunker will go down. He's not actually going to opt to try and save that. And FanTaSy needs to do what he can with what units he has. But the vulture moving up and the mines are surrounding the tanks. There's so many SCVs here, they're all going to go down. Another big mine drag goes down, killing about 4 SCVs. The SCVs are now up at the tanks of HiyA, which is very good, but the vultures now are going to actually defend that. It looks like FanTaSy did manage to get 2 extra tanks out, and he's going to try and hold this ramp. A vulture moves down and actually gets a really nice shot along with the tank. And another mine goes off, and oh, another mine drag does kill the SCVs. The SCVs have moved out to the base to mine again. He's being a little bit over ambitious here. The tanks aren't actually in range, but this CC is getting taken down. This mine's now surrounding the factories. That was a really lucky tank. But he has 1 tank against the 2 or 3 tanks under this barracks, and HiyA's going to send across 2 more tanks. He's not actually lost all that many SCVs, and well, he's lost quite a few, but the supplies are heavily favouring HiyA now. Moving those SCVs up to the top has actually cost FanTaSy quite a lot. HiyA's base is still not finished, so if FanTaSy can hold this off, he does have a chance of coming back into this. The barracks is slowly dying, and it looks like HiyA is building his engineering bay up here to scout A to scout for things, and he could even possibly be expecting some kind of Starcore play behind this to try and counter the tanks with just raids. But FanTaSy's going to do what he can to try and save himself, but each tank that moves up is getting sniped, and every tank is on, well, the only 2 tanks he has now, one of them is very low on health. He's going to try and repair it. He's running out of money, he doesn't have many SCVs mining, and he can only really afford to build tanks off of one factory in terms of gas. So these 6 tanks at the top of his ramp are going to make it very hard for him to break down. And vultures move down again. They're going to drop mines outside of the tanks again, and the SCV is going to try and save the tank, and it does. But another mine goes off. It's going to kill, but oh, it just about kills one of the tanks, but moves and doesn't explode. So that tank is in dire straits. There's 5 more tanks up here. There's going to be more tanks moving over, and FanTaSy is holding on here with his 20 supply. He's going to try and do what he can to defend the bottom of his ramp. But I think FanTaSy is going to have to call GG at some point. Of course, he could be calling a FanTaSy GG right now, which it does look like. He is very, very far behind. His armory is up, not researching anything. And Goliaths are now shelling his command center, which was the only thing he could really use to scout. And vultures move down again. The mines don't go off, thankfully for him, but a tank shot does go down, kills one of his tanks. The other tank does go down to a mine. 1 tank against 5 plus vultures and Goliaths. This is not looking good for FanTaSy. FanTaSy's doing what he can to hold on, actually opting to try and build a vulture to try and help here. He's gonna partially shield his tank with this command center above it, but it looks like he's just trying to repair it. And HiyA, meanwhile, back at his base, is just adding on a lot more factories. Gonna add on a starport now, sending more and more units across. There's not really much FanTaSy can do anymore. The vulture that pops out does nearly die. He's going to save it just about, but I'm not sure it's really going to help him. He's trying to hold on, but he's not going to be able to get out of his base anytime soon. He doesn't have a starport going up. He can't even afford a starport. He's not even building SCVs anymore. He's doing everything he can to try and hold the bottom of his ramp. It is a very strong defendable position, but being this far behind and with turrets going up, it doesn't look like HiyA is going to be stupid and try and move down the ramp. FanTaSy is actually going to try and move up and take out these tanks. A very, very risky play here, actually moving ever so slightly forward, but then sieging back up, knowing he can't actually do anything. And the vulture does go down after laying 1 single mine, but 1 single mine isn't really going to help him. He's now adding on SCVs again, and he's going to slowly try and siege forward, but there's so much vision here for HiyA that no matter where he goes, he may be able to see the tank. Maybe he might be able to take out some of these units, but this combined shelling power will be able to take out everything FanTaSy has. And HiyA almost playing with his food right now. It doesn't want to risk giving away a huge advantage by moving in, but I'm not sure, even with amazing play, could FanTaSy come back from this. His 2 tanks do go down, 1 tank left, 3 vultures. He's going to try and micro it against 3 vultures. The mines do go down. He gets away from the mines, but the vultures are just going to kill what's left of his poor SCVs. Still not opting to unsiege his things. Oh, the SCVs are pulled to try and defend against the vulture. It looks like he does have 1 more tank coming. This tank is running straight into 3 mines. There's nothing it can do. It's going to go down, and HiyA does move down the ramp, and GG is called. Good game by HiyA, taking advantage of the fast expand of FanTaSy by doing a very powerful 2-factory play. We'll actually take out FanTaSy in this first game and make the set 1-0 up for him. 2 more maps are left, which will be cast tomorrow, and it's up to FanTaSy now to play for his tournament life and come back in this series.